The kathara grid is the core holographic template upon which the human body and consciousness enter dimensionalization in order to experience manifestation. So it is the kathara grid that your consciousness first anchors into the dimensionalized system so you can participate in a hologram. I'm going to answer one quick question that was part of a question. I forgot the other half of it by the time we moved on through the first part. Was when we were talking about fetal integration. Someone had asked a question about abortion. Okay? Yep, I know. All right, and I will answer that because that's a big controversial issue that government loves to get involved with, that it really should mind its own business because it's between a person, their soul, the soul that's incoming, and their relationship to Source. Before I explain a little bit about the abortion issue, I will go back to the point that I said between the 33rd and 56th day is the first time soul integration can take place, which means before the 33rd day. There's no way there's going to be a soul who is anchored into that body. Now, in the days when our DNA templates were functioning the right way and we had our consciousness with us down here, you didn't have accidental pregnancies. In fact, you had wonderful, elaborate rituals for 2 years before the fact, preparing the body, preparing the place where it was going to happen, and you had open telepathic communication with the incoming soul. You knew who it was, why it chose you, why you chose it. It was a very open family experience before the being even came in to your body as a female. In the original days, in 12-strand DNA activation, the body systems are a bit different. Breatharians don't need to eat. Well, they also have babies in different ways. There's actually an energy form that's projected out through the navel region that serves as the vessel. The child actually grows outside of the womb once the conception occurs. Talk about easy birth. You know? You don't need Lamaze. In the old days, you didn't need Lamaze. But anyway, now ideally, situations don't arise where you have an issue of would a person have to abort a child or not, abort a possible child, abort somebody that might become a child. Because right now, if you don't know, have enough consciousness with you to control your own fertility. In the old days, we knew a woman could choose when ovulation would occur, and it would only occur when conception was desired. So there were no, the question of abortion was never there. But now that it is, because right now what's happening is there's all sorts of interference. For thousands of years there have been here. There have been babies born here that aren't human souls, that didn't belong here in the first place, that were created because humans got messed with by fallen angelics and guided into conception relationships that shouldn't have happened, that weren't part of their divine blueprint, in order to have fallen angelics incarnate part of their soul matrices into the human. They called it an experiment. It was an experiment in how to take over a species from the inside out. Now, in the old days, there were some really weird things that happened, where before we lost our sensitivity to being able to feel what kind of energy was coming in, some people would know that there was a bad seed coming. There was such a thing as a bad seed. This is when issues of abortion actually first came up, when there would be certain, a woman would start to feel dark avatars in the field, and they could feel that they were being used as a vessel to birth them. And there were times when they would literally throw themselves off cliffs before they would allow that to come through their bodies. There was a lot of abuse done to the human body, particularly with females, where they were used as breeding vessels here from 25,500 BC and forward. So the issue of abortion really started in Atlantis, when women were faced with the choice of whether they were going to be a part, an unwilling part, of allowing this planet to be invaded by fallen angelics who were going to try to take it over, or whether they were going to stop the process. So originally it wasn't about trying to cause harm to something. It was a decision that was made to try to prevent harm from happening. Abortion is a strange issue nowadays. The same issues are going on, but it doesn't mean you go out and drown your baby because you think it's bad. We're way beyond being able to work in that framework, and that's not the right way to do it either. Because at this point, whatever's coming in, even if it might be a dark avatar, there are ways you can try to help it connect to its Christos. Because before it became a dark avatar, it first was a founder. It was a founder's race being that has a divine blueprint. So in this state of consciousness that we have grown enough to where drastic measures should not have to be taken. Now, when it comes to abortion, God doesn't get mad and punish you if you're a woman who has an abortion, for whatever reasons you chose to, many women have abortions because they don't know how to control their fertility. Because it's only been recently, in the last 30 years or so, we've actually had chemical options to try to control it, and then we have the Catholic Church telling us we don't dare use them because God's going to get mad. Well, the only thing that's going to get mad, if a woman decides they don't want to have a child, and ideally the decision's made before the conception happens, so you don't have the issue of abortion to deal with, the only person who gets upset with a woman having a free choice to not be a breeder are fallen angelic races who want to get as many of their little bodies on the planet as they possibly can in order to have an army, a fleet of consciousness here in physical form for when the stargates open. There have been breedings going on for 25,000 years to make sure there was a team, a little army that would represent the fallen angelic sides here in human form. Now, the issue of abortion has two aspects to it. One, nobody has the right to make a decision for a being. A woman carrying a child here, that's a big soul obligation, contract, responsibility thing. No man has the right to enforce it on a woman. No government has the right in the Christos to tell a woman what that choice needs to be. However, the male person that helped to conceive the fetal pattern does have a say, where a woman should realize just because it's in their body, it's also a part of the gene code and the consciousness of the male that helped to create it. There's a responsibility factor for both people toward the new pattern of potential life they've created and toward each other and treating each other with love and respect. If a guy wants to have a child and a woman doesn't and pregnancy happens, there's a dilemma. There's some big, deep soul issues that they need to work through together. But if it comes down to the physical, technical aspects of abortion, there are some times when it doesn't cause any damage. If fetal integration has not occurred, what you are doing is the same thing as removing a piece of living physical tissue from the body, such as when you get an organ removed. Except it's not even quite as much a part of your own morphogenetic field yet, because it's only a small, new potential for life. You can have an abortion as a woman without creating karmic consequences, but only if fetal integration has not occurred. Now, if fetal integration has occurred, regardless of whether it's a Christos avatar, a dark avatar, or a little guy from dimension 4 that's coming in, once fetal integration has occurred, there is an electromagnetic field bond between your DNA template as a mother and the DNA template or the consciousness template of the fetal integrated being. That means if you get rid of the body pattern that it's trying to anchor into, it's stuck in your field. If it's stuck in your field, that means you've literally taken on its whole karmic imprint, whoever it is. It also means that while that other consciousness is stuck in your field, it's stuck and you're stuck. It will block your DNA activation process and you'll block its. It will usually lead to a condition where a few years down the road another pregnancy happens. So it can come out of your field and into a body and become individuated and separate from you. These things are handled. These soul agreements are made on much higher levels. They're made between the souls and the oversouls and the avatar levels of consciousness. If you're a female and had an abortion, you're not damned for life. God's not going to throw you into the pits of hell because you did a bad thing. Here it's very frustrating because we don't know when the point of fetal integration has occurred unless we are able to establish telepathic rapport with the person who has their eye on that fetal pattern. That's the first thing that men and women really should do if they get in a situation where pregnancy is an issue around them at all, whether they're thinking about doing it, whether they're afraid it happened by accident. They should start to realize if they run their Maharic shield, which we'll learn how to do to bring in the Christos frequencies, they can use that stream of consciousness to go through their own avatar level and say, please help me understand what I got myself into. What is the right thing to do here? Because there are so many multi-level issues involved with pregnancy. Pregnancy has to do with agreeing to help another soul. Babies aren't little people. They're in little bodies. They're big people. We're all beings that have avatar levels, oversoul levels, soul levels. You might have just a soul coming into the body where it's not actually going to anchor any parts of its higher self. It'll have them as potential, but it might not be there to express it this life. You may have an agreement that you made in 2 million BC that in this time frame you would bring somebody through. So you don't know. A pregnancy that happens by accident, in this life, there is no such thing as an accident. It happened for some reason. Now, whether that reason's part of the divine blueprint or not remains to be seen. And this is where learning to establish a daily rapport with your own higher consciousness through your own avatar level can help give you the guidance you need. Because there may be multi-level soul agreements that yes, you're supposed to go through with it, or yes, you're supposed to have an abortion. Even abortions that have taken place where there was a soul that came in, fetal integration had happened, and the being is stuck in the mother's field for sometimes 20 years. Sometimes all through that lifetime, and it'll come through with the mother in the next fetal integration process, where literally in the next life that child will be born. Sometimes these are agreements that are made. So to be able to pass a judgment on abortion from the three-dimensional level is ludicrous. There are too many issues and potential reasons involved. When it comes to personal responsibility, when I talk to people, particularly like teens that kind of like get into the Kundalini force and it's the only thing that feels good in the universe right now, so let's like worry about it later, and then later comes a little too soon and you have to worry about it much sooner than you wanted to. What I do try to suggest to people is, because it's extremely difficult to tell whether fetal integration has occurred, the best course to take is the general course of the do unto others as you would want others to do unto you. It is the concept of being harmless whenever possible. And if there's a possibility that you have created a child, it's even if you're not ready to have one, there are millions of people that would love to adopt babies. You don't know right now if that consciousness is on the good side as far as the Christos pattern or something trying to work against it. But it's not your judgment call anyway. If you've gotten yourself in a situation, you didn't get there alone, first of all. Your own soul knows why you're there. Your oversoul knows why, and your avatar knows why. It may be something that you carried through from another one of your life experiences in the other time vectors. It may be that there something happened that you were supposed to fulfill, a birth agreement, and it didn't happen. And this time, even though you're not quite ready, it's time to clear that pattern so you can move on, and so it can move on. So you might do it here. So I do recommend, whenever possible, I wouldn't want to have to make the decision whether I'm going to terminate without knowing what I'm doing, terminate the potential for life. But at the same time, if it was a situation, say, where the mother was going to die, if a pregnancy was allowed to go through, the mother has a right. The mother should go into her own space with her own Christos self and say, what is the right thing for me to do here? If it's really going to be this child or me, what is the right thing to do? And each person will get a different answer. That's why a government should not have a right to impose its will over the will and the consciousness of a person down here and their connection to God and their connection to their own Christos. So when it comes to abortion, that's a hard one to answer. We can tell you the technicals. We can tell you that yes, if you abort something that already fetal integrated, you're going to carry it around as baggage and it's going to hold you down until you can set it free, because you're holding it down as well. We can tell you that if you have an abortion and it hasn't fetal integrated, you will not have anything left in your field except perhaps guilt. If you don't know, if you think you might have caused harm, you will teach yourself hard lessons through the experience. So again, it's a personal choice, but it always should be made vertically, not horizontally. And what I mean vertically is, don't look for the answers out here. It doesn't matter what your mother, your brother, the priest, the pope, or your government have to say about it. What matters is what your own Christos self has to say, even if it's the most unpopular decision in the world. And sometimes having the baby is the worst. Sometimes the whole family, oh, how could you do that? Oh, that's horrible. Don't have that child. Have an abortion. And on the other side, you have the ones that the right to life are saying, oh, you can't kill anything. How dare you? You're terrible. You'll be damned forever. And they show you pictures of mutilated fetuses and, try to make you feel really awful. You need to find a personal relationship with it and realize that no God is going to damn you if you do have one. But you may take on a burden yourself, a burden of guilt, because you made a decision without knowing for sure. But you can know for sure. If you work with simple meditations on a daily basis to get in touch with your Christos self that you should do long before you worry about babies at all, you will be able to literally get a knowing. And that's where you can, through that knowing, say, okay, well, who is the soul that's attached here? And, you know, who is it? Somebody I know. You can start to have a telepathic rapport first with your own Christos self to get your guidance. How can I act responsibly and in my divine blueprint with this? Whatever's right. If you surrender what you think you want to do to whatever is the highest and rightest thing to do for you and everybody else from the Christos blueprint, and just surrender that decision and ask for guidance from your own Christos, you will get the clearest answer. Sometimes it'll be so clear it'll blow your mind, where you'll start to hear your abdomen talk to you as a female. You'll literally get telepathic. Hello, Mom. I'm here. Oh, dear. No, it's not time to run for the funny farm and get Valium. It's time to realize you're opening up your D4 circuitry so you can start to hear multidimensional communication. So that, I won't go further with that because there's really not any further that I can go with that question. It's a good question that was asked. But when it comes to how countries try to pass laws to govern this kind of thing, countries should know better than to try to inflict their three-dimensional will on a God issue. Churches should know better, and in the old days they did. The Christos teachings never taught you not to have an abortion. The Christos teachings taught you to, first of all, not get yourself into pregnancies that you didn't want to have in the first place. But if that happened, it taught you to run vertically and have your own personal relationship with Source. Ideally, mother and father sit down together, hold hands and say, we're going to go and let our Christos space come in, and we're going to get guidance here to know what's right to do for the baby, for ourselves, for the universe, for the divine blueprint, and they would get the guidance they needed. And if a government was acting in a Christos way, it would respect every individual's right to put God first and to put their personal relationship with God first. We don't have a society like that right now. On this planet, everybody's trying to manipulate women that way. And it's been one of the worst ways that people have tried to control women and literally drain their life force energies by using them as breeding vessels. This has been going on for thousands of years. So if women are angry and don't want to have babies anymore, it's no surprise because the privilege has been abused. So there's a lot of issues surrounding that get into our gender roles, what has happened here on this planet, how sex has been abused, both through overuse of it and underuse of it, and making it bad and vile. So there's a lot of things connected with that. At some point I'd love to do an ethics workshop. Christos ethics. The book isn't down yet. I run my life by them, and they come through. Christos ethics, once you realize what they are, which is the direct connection between you and Source through your Christos. You don't need a book once you can open that conduit, because you will act ethically by simply asking your higher parts to give you that guidance in every situation. And surrendering what you think is personal will. If you can't figure out for sure what something is, turn it over to your higher parts and trust and surrender there. Not surrender your will where I'm going to be powerless and I'm going to be a martyr. Surrender to a part of you that already knows the answer and the best one, and know that it will come to you and you will be given it. That's the most that can be said on ethics right now. At some point there'll be a book. There'll be a translation of the Dorotura records on what basically, how do you live in a Christos society? What are the ethics of a Christos society? And if you saw those books and then looked at what's going on out there, your hair would stand on end. Because we are demonstrating such a severe reflection of the anti-Christos model in the way our governments are structured, the way our economics are structured, the way the whole thing is operating out there. And what's so sad is so much of it is done under lip service to Christianity or to spirituality. And lip service, if there's anything that really bugs me, I'm a very loving being and take to heart God allows. So I don't judge people or civilizations for what they do, but I can still get bugged, and I can get temporarily mad and let that energy run through. It's passion. It's not anger, it's passion. It's somebody who is acting in very anti-Christos ways, and at the same time arrogantly boasting about how much they have a right to pass judgment on other people because they're acting in spiritual integrity and other people aren't. Do you know how many religions teach you to be like that? That is lip service to Christianity, and it is an anti-Christian attitude. So when it comes to things like abortion, there are huge areas that a person has to find within themselves as far as making the decision. But when it comes to governments poking their nose into things where only the person and God have a business being, there's three people that should be involved with the decision on an abortion: the man and the woman and the incoming. all through the Christos. And if those three beings work it out together, they will find the right answer for that situation. So that's the stance on abortion. Now, off that subject and back on to body parts. Yeah, there is a relationship, vaguely. Okay. So we've heard. So we've heard. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now this, going through this, the kathara, level 1, 12 tree, contains the 12 primary kathara centers and primary 15 kathara lines. There are 15 lines that connect those 12 centers that correspond to various regions of the physical body and bioenergetic field, and which ground, anchor, consciousness into the framework of dimensionalization. So it's through that 12 tree grid and through the kathara lines that run between those centers, which are energy flash lines, that our consciousness is anchored into our physical body. The kathara level 2 crystal seals grid contains signets, those 3 signets. Remember, the signets go with the grid underneath it. The 12 tree grid, you have the first, second, and third kathara centers, and they appear as 3 little dots within the first shield. Okay, so this is where kathara level 1 grid interfaces with the next grid, where the shields are, where the energy mathematical pattern from kathara level 1 grid, where the divine blueprint is fully encoded, come up to the next level of manifestation, into the shields grid. Okay? The signets are consolidated points of dimensional frequency. So the signets are replicas, actually, of the kathara centers, what are called kathara centers here. The signets hold the same mathematical patterns and are smaller versions of them that connect directly into the kathara centers. Okay? They correspond. So say you have your telluric shield, which is your density 1 shield. That would have 3 signets in it, signet 1, 2, and 3, which are connected directly to kathara centers 1, 2, and 3. So this is where your shields on the level 2 grid connect into the kathara level 1 grid at the signets. The signets are consolidated points of dimensional frequency. The shields are 3-dimensional scalar wave disks that emanate from sets of 3 signets. So it's actually the signets that first come into manifestation and hold the pattern from the kathara grid beneath it. And then from that pattern, the scalar waves expand out to become the shield. And this is where you begin to pick up your mathematical differentiation that makes you look different from the next person, from the next species. Okay? Now, this is a fun part where we get to see where all these things live in our body. Okay, the kathara grid, level 1. Kathara center 1. This is page, what page is this, Letty? 64. Okay. These are the 12 kathara centers, and these are the areas in the body that correspond directly to that grid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. These are the core programming centers in the body. And when we are running a Maharic recoding process, which means the process of activating the Maharic shield in order to bring up D12 current to clear out the core template, you are going to be running D12 frequency up through this grid in the body. In your body first, and then in your client's body. You're going to do it by activating hand palm chakras, which we'll get to probably tomorrow in the morning. We're going to start with that. We'll get you up to triadic currents tonight, I hope. Okay. Now, the 12 kathara centers, the first one is called the earth core, to the center of the earth in chakra 13. We also have a chakra down there called chakra 13. Now, chakra 13 connects to D13, which takes you into the primal light fields of density 5. So chakra 13 is where kathara center 1 is located. All right, this is down. Imagine that where you're standing, wherever you're standing on the planet, go halfway down through the planet into where the core of the earth would be. And that is the point where your grid connects to, where this connects to the earth's kathara grid. That's the point that you're going to be bringing frequency up from when we activate the shields. You're going to literally use the breath. After you use the Hierophant to activate the shields, to open the conduits, you're going to use the breath to bring it up and put it in various areas, depending on what you're trying to do. Okay? The second one is called they have different names, and again, some of the names are really strange. I can't even pronounce this one. The Nuan Yun. In the male, it's in the prostrate gland. In the female, it's in the vagina. I think they call it the G-spot. I've heard that term thrown around, and that seems to be what this is obviously associated with running the Kundalini energies in the creative process as well as the creation of life process. These are the frequencies that control the part of the aspects of creation and sexuality and sex drive. Now, what's interesting is because we have distortions in Kathara Grid 2, 1, 2, and 3, in Kathara Grid 2, there's a whole bunch of wacky sexual deviation going on in our culture, not to mention a whole bunch of twisted ideas about what sex is supposed to be. Sex is a holy thing, and it's not holy just because it makes babies. It was not created just for the process of procreation. That's one sacred thing it can be used for. But when a male and female come together as souls, as oversouls, as avatars, in Christos love, the Kundalini currents that each of them run can be combined. And when they combine, they run a huge amount of current that can be used for tremendous healing or manifesting powers. This is why you have a lot of black magic cult type people that are using sex magic, because they're tapping into lower anti-Christos teachings of how to use the Kundalini to amplify energy. They're using it for the wrong reasons. But the potential to use sexual energy in its divine Christos blueprint, it was supposed to be a joyous, beautiful way of sharing. What we see as body parts sharing with each other out here in 3D, remember, this is just a hologram. We get hung up on body parts here. This is a hologram. This is the illusion part. If you take that away, during the sexual act, what you see are two beautiful fields of light with two currents, main vertical currents of energy coming together. And those two currents of energy open to each other, and they form a beautiful figure-8 infinity sign. And the currents of both run through each. And the fields, the huva bodies and the auric levels expand. And there is an ability for one avatar and another to amplify their consciousness and bring in their rishi level together. It was meant to help you grow into becoming whole here. When you get to being an avatar where you're fully 12-strand activated, do avatars at that level have sex? Not in the same way. It becomes a moot point, because after a while, the energy fields, you're in an intimate love relationship with everything around you, every species, every rock, every tree, every molecule. And at that point, but it's usually, fortunately, the body's evolved to that point too, where you don't have the apparatus anymore to worry about anyway. So, gender just becomes a difference between whether you are primarily made out of part of cum units or part of chi units. Base magnetic or base electrical is really what male-female gender differentiation is in consciousness. And they are both equal, and they are both important, and they both are required to have either, because it is a balance of polarities. So when because of the distortions right now that are in Kathara Center 2, because there are distortions in the planetary grid line 2, which is called an axiotonal line in the planetary body, and because there is a Kathara grid distortion in the planetary shields in the second Kathara Center, in D2, we are all processing part of that confusion. Sexual confusion. We get sexual identity confusion. We get power struggles between the currents in men and women that come out to be gender struggles. We get power struggles within ourselves between our own female and male aspects, because we all have both. We're both male and female. We're all androgynous beings, truthfully. We may be having one side of it amplified a little more, and that gives us what our physical form is. But we're androgynous. A soul doesn't worry about whether it's male or female. A soul can love male or female. That doesn't mean we all need to go and be bisexual. That's another way of, do you really need to use your life force currents this way? Some people do. It's not our job to pass judgment on them. However, there is a thing called sacred sex, that when we get these areas of the body, the first three-dimensional levels of the body straightened out, where there's not distortions being carried that give us distortions in our feeling body, and in our physical sensations, and in our conscious association of what we're doing, once that's cleared out, there's a whole new world of what relationship means. A lot of people think, and there's a distortion in the New Age movement, that everything's free love. right? That means go and sleep with everything in eternity and don't worry about it. Now, who might benefit from this? The answer to that question lies in what happens to the DNA template during the act of sex and orgasm. Something happens to the DNA template. When the primal life force currents begin to activate in the bodies, they begin to activate in the DNA templates. A combining of codes begins to happen temporarily. One of the best ways to possess somebody's body, if you're a dark avatar wanting to come in, is to get yourself into a human body and to seduce the other person into orgasm. This is why there's this whole weird thing happening with male-female orgasm issues. In the ancient days, the Anunnaki used to use human women, and they would forcefully drive them to orgasm to make them open their DNA so they could do two things. One, impregnate them with Anunnaki fetuses. Two, so they could give them overlays, reversed matrix overlays in their DNA template. So women adopted a survival pattern. We won't have an orgasm if you kill us. And we're still living it. Even when we find somebody that we know is the love of our life and we really, really wish we had more of a sexual orientation. A long time ago we got so disgusted with being used and abused, and we realized we were being used as the vessels through which an army of little nasties would be created in order to take over the planet. We decided that no way. You can do anything to me. You know what people, archetypes, embody this for us in our cultures. You look at people who turn to women, who turn to prostitution. They have gotten an attitude with it. I'm going to control this process. You're going to use me, huh? Well, I can do that back. And you know what? I can fake it, and you'll think I mean it. You'll think you got me, but you don't. We learn these attitudes. We learn them in the ancient times. The knowledge is coming through from those time vectors when we were abused. Men have had similar issues. When the Anunnaki races actually came here physically, they were larger than the humans at that time. I mean, larger physically. And they would try to seduce the human women away from their male counterparts. And they would use their physical prowess to do it. So men have adopted this not enoughness feeling very often about their own sexuality, and they often spend a great deal of their lives trying to fix that, trying to prove to themselves that they are enough, sometimes feeling so much that they're not enough that they get a real big ego concept and everything has to be thought like they think, you know, with their lower chakras first. All of these distortions have come up from the events that are taking place in the other time vectors, that are taking place right now. So as we begin the healing process of these lower kathara centers, which are connected to DNA strands 1, 2, and 3. All sorts of issues come up in our lives. We find all sorts of weird emotional feelings coming up. There may be a sense in women of being horribly violated. There may be a huge anger in men of being one-upped to the point where why even show up, because you were just going to get flattened by these big pretty guys from the sky who were coming, you know, to take your females away from you. There was trickery used to seduce the females away from the men. And then the men were often killed just to get rid of them, because what was done here was a forced hybridization experiment with fallen angelic races, where they wanted the human gene code so they could get into the human bodies because of its accelerated potentials to interface with the planetary grids. So there's a lot of healing that needs to take place here. If we look at the craziness in our global societies, we have every extreme you can imagine here. We have people that are celibate and wouldn't be touched if, you know, if it was God himself came down, because they're convinced that sex is bad. You have people doing the other thing, free love, let's be swingers. Let's go sleep with everything because it feels good. If it feels good, do it. Well, there used to be some truth to if it feels good, do it. Before our emotional bodies got twisted to the point where our emotional bodies are connected to strand 2, or connected to kathara center 2. There's a part of ourself that runs there that makes things feel good that aren't good for us. So you can't just trust the emotional nature unless it's combined with the Christos frequency coming in, which will straighten it out and let you know what you really feel about something, so your biology is not dragging you all over the planet into relationships that are causing you harm. Okay? a seduction tool to harm you, because what will happen is if it can get you to have an orgasm on D4 in your astral body, that will filter down from here, from your fourth kathara center. That program will be entered there. It'll go into 3, 2, and 1, and it'll anchor down in the physical body. So it's being used as a way to implant right now and to really mess with people right now. Now, in other times, astral sex was no different than physical sex. If it's used in the right way, it's a way that you can, well, let's say that your twin and your husband, the person you love more than anything in the world, that you have a wonderful relationship with, happens to be on another planet for a tour of duty because he's working. And you're down here and you really miss each other. Well, you just meet in the middle. We used to use it that way. These days, it's dangerous because it's being used as a tool to seduce people into opening their biofields on the astral level, which is the D4 level. Same little trick is being used by telling people, just open your heart. Those words are telling you to open your heart chakra, which is connected to your astral field. Something that's telling you to just open your heart without running your Maharic seal is asking you to open yourself up so they can infiltrate your biofield at the D4 level. So right now, it's important, and there's a lot of people, there are a lot of women especially. I've heard this from hundreds of people at this point. They have been approached in the astral, often first in the dream state or during a meditation, by a being that's lovely and wonderful and beautiful and makes them feel like they just want to melt. And it's just like Adonis walked out of the ancient Greek mythology and just came and laid himself at your feet. Everything you could possibly imagine that would be wonderful to you. They have the ability, the fallen angelics have the ability to read your fields. They know where your buttons are, what your ideal would be. And right now, that's being used as a tool, and it's not just being used on women. There's also a number of men, but men tend to talk about it less, from what I've met, where they have been approached by very beautiful angels, or ETs, they'll call themselves sometimes. Particularly the Palladians, they love to do this. Palladians. That's a wonderful word that so many of us in the New Age movement have come to associate with light and love and Christos development and lip service. The Palladian matrix, we will get into in the Templar workshop more, but they are a group of Anunnaki that have a vested interest in getting into human bodies right now. And the fastest and best way to do it is to grab them in the astral, because we don't realize we have that astral there yet. And the few of us that realize it's there somewhere don't realize what it is yet. We don't realize there's really a part of our body there, that really you are engaging in something there, and what you're engaging in there is getting coded into your body down here. It's a way of being hijacked. So right now, we've been, the warning was put out by the guardian races that right now, though there's wonderful things in the future that can be explored with this potential, as far as it's not a bad thing in and of itself. Okay, having, romance in the astral on D4, or romance in D5, or romance in D7, or wherever. Romance is wonderful if it's done in the Christos imprint. But right now, because it's a tactic being used to trick us, we're being asked to save any kind of our interactions that way for 3D. If you can't meet the person here in 3D and make sure you feel good with that person really in 3D, then just tell them that you love them dearly and you want to be celibate there. And see if they still love you. Then they might try to get you to drink something instead. If you have visions where things come to you and hand you a cup, drink this. Frequency. The cup, the liquid are symbols. They're trying to get you to ingest frequency from them. This can be very, very dangerous. You might as well have sex with them. Because what they're trying to do is encode you mathematically with programs that affect your kathara grid. So there are things that are happening right now in the world that people don't realize. I mean, it's so wonderful to discover you have an astral lover, especially if you've been like striking out here for 20 years. Where you're just, it's like no matter what you do here, you have a great relationship lasts 4 weeks and then you can't stand each other. And no matter what you do, it falls apart. Or you had a 20-year relationship where you're getting, where you don't even know who you are by the time you get out of it because you lost so much of yourself because the other one was sucking energy off you. At this point, astral sex looks good because at least you can make them go away if you want them to, right? Or you can call them in when you need them and they really come. But it's a trick right now that's being used that we can go higher. If we can realize that any kind of sexuality is really an energy exchange that's taking place, that opens your core template temporarily to receive what the other person has. If the other person is indeed a pure being, that can be good for you. It can actually help to accelerate your own gene code. Now, there have been times in the evolution of our race, I'll get to two questions, I'll get to them in a second. There are times in the evolution of our race when these tactics have been used by guardian races, but with full, open explanation of what was taking place in order to do bioregenesis for some of the fallen races to help them pick up in the most rapid way possible the new codes, the higher Christos codes in their DNA template. Unfortunately, since 22,000, no, it was actually before that, it was 208,216 BC. In that particular, there's a series of events that took place back there where literally the reason why the D12 current couldn't run on this planet after that period was because there was a whole race of guardians, avatars. They had 6-strand activation all the time, and they could turn on literally their ascended master consciousness when needed. There was a group of other beings that were out of the draconian matrix. It's called the Omicron draconian matrix. I can't talk, my lips are getting tired. We lost our ability here to run D12 frequency because of sex. Because the group of people who were the guardians here, who were very sweet and loving, and horribly naive and trusting to a fault. They knew soft love, but they didn't know tough love. And they never thought that anybody could abuse some of the most sacred things in the world to actually put one over on you and steal your energy and your planet out from under you. There was a race of beings that had entered the Emerald Covenant from the Omicron draconian matrix. And they said, we want to, we're going to be good now. We'd like to do bioregenesis so we can regenerate our 12-strand pattern so we can become Christos beings like you. And they were allowed to come onto the planet and to adopt a human type form. But the DNA in that human type form had a long way to go. It had the matrix of human type codes, but running in reverse mathematical sequence. It's called a reverse matrix. And that is an anti-Christos matrix. And over evolution, and by combining, there were going to be a race line made that would slowly purge out those distortions so those souls could incarnate through a human form. Well, they gave lip service to wanting to do the Emerald Covenant, and for about 100 years they got their people on planet, draconian souls in human type bodies, and the founders races were trying to make sure, hoping this experiment went well. They were trying to help the draconian matrix to get back into the Christos pattern. What they didn't calculate was how naive avatars could be when they were down here, because at first there were only selective marriages allowed. Because if you got a person who had higher frequency activated, even if it's on a reverse current, than the person that you were making love with at the time, even if you had an avatar here and only an oversoul here, but the avatar only had its own DNA activated to strand 6, and this one amped it up to strand 9, this code would overpower the other, and that would be the imprint that went into the other person's DNA. It took them about 50 years of intermarriages and breaking the rules by not running the Maharic seal every time they were going to engage in intimacy. They convinced their angelic human partners that there was too much frequency in the field and it made copulation uncomfortable for them, so please don't run the seal right now. You have enough D12 frequency in your field. Because before, nobody, avatars didn't combine their fields without first opening the Maharata current. That was just a natural part of it. You brought the Christos in to any coupling. And because there was a whole collective of the people who ran the round tables, which are the Stargate control grids, who allowed their DNA to be compromised, and it wasn't realized until it was too late that they had literally had their templates reversed. They began to run reverse codes into the planetary grids during a stellar activation cycle, or a Stargate cycle. And that broke the link to the Christos field in the planetary grids. We're still paying for that now. What we're fixing now on the planetary level, and what each of us are processing a piece of, has to do with that time and that decision. And we're still stumbling around trying to figure out what's the right way to have an intimate relationship where the power is balanced and it's supposed to be this loving, wonderful thing. So there's a lot to the sexual issue. And I won't go any further with that in this one. If I answer questions on this one, we're going to be here till tomorrow morning talking about sex. And I know that, we really need more teachings on things we have to deal with every day. Because there are things that you can do that will help you tremendously. run your Maharic seal, for instance. When we learn to do this, which we're going to do the beginnings of this tonight. When you learn to run your Maharic seal, you're temporarily, manually activating what would normally be activated permanently and all the time if your 12-strand DNA was activated. You're bringing in a pillar of light around your fields, and it creates a buffer of D12 frequency around your DNA template, which means if you couple with someone, you will give them a gift of a D12 charge that either they'll be able to receive or they won't, but whatever comes from them, you will receive it only if it's in the right sequence of the Christos sequence. So you'll protect your own fields that way. That applies to the astral level as well, but there are more games being played there, and I wouldn't take it on. I mean, I remember lifetimes where I didn't marry anybody in the physical, and I just had my partner hanging around with me in the astral, and we left it at that. This isn't the time frame to do that. So anyway, my personal opinion, I would be advised anybody to just cool the astral relationships if you got them going. Tell them, I'll be your friend and I love you dearly, but we're going to be platonic now. This is something I need to do for me and my Christos. And if they have a problem with that, you might want to question their motives in the first place. Okay, real quick, yes?
This is not a sex person. It's information is possible in dream states. So if you go to sleep and somebody, can they infiltrate there as well?
Yes. You know, the drama we're in the middle of right now, everything becomes dangerous if you don't know how to run your D12 frequency. If you know how to run your D12 frequency, you don't have to be afraid of any of it, because your Maharata current will create natural protection if you run enough of it. Critical mass of it is important. That's why you need to use the techniques and build with them and run more and more of them. And I'm going to go through into these at these points so we can get there. I'd like to at least have you to be able to activate your Maharic seal tonight before you go so you can begin running that current. All right? Okay. Oh, I also, too, want to point out, we do have...